Hello and welcome. Alright, so for today's video we're going to be doing something pretty simple, which is going over just a handful of symptoms that can indicate that there's something wrong with your rats. Now, a couple of caveats, as always. One, these are going to be like some more subtle symptoms of illness, and a lot of time these don't necessarily amount to anything. So just because you see your rat doing something that is on this list does not mean you have to automatically assume the worst and rush them to the vet. This is more of a, if you see or notice, pay attention. For the most part, I will tell you which ones need immediate vet intervention. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. So with rats, they are very good at hiding their illnesses. A lot of people say that about a lot of different animals, but in general, with small pets that are exclusively prey animals like rats, guinea pigs, hamsters, that kind of animal, they're very, very good at hiding when there is something wrong. So you have to be on the lookout for weird random things. And once you've had rats for a while, you get very good at being like, that's not normal. What's happening there? But for those of you who are... Hi! For those of you who are a little bit newer to rats and are just curious what are some more subtle symptoms or signs that your rat is ill, let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about head shaking. So if you notice your rat shaking their head a lot, this can be an indication that there is something wrong. And the most common thing that will be wrong with your rat shaking their head a lot is probably going to be like the early signs of an ear infection, because it's uncomfortable up there, so they're shaking their head. They can also do that, or even if it's itchy, sometimes they'll shake their head. So they'll do that. This can also be a symptom or a sign of a tooth root abscess, or possibly even a Zimbal's gland tumor, because the head shaking is indicating that they feel something uncomfortable up here. And so they're shaking their head trying to alleviate some of that discomfort. And that usually means something like pain, pressure, itchiness, something like that, just going on up here that indicates that they need some kind of monitoring. You can rub their cheeks to see if you feel any lumps, if you notice any swelling. With ear infections, usually the head shaking does not last very long before you get other symptoms. So yes, if you notice constant head shaking, there's probably something wrong, and you might want to take them to the vet. If you see them doing it just for 20 minutes for a long time, and then for the next 24 hours they don't, I wouldn't worry too much. Again, this is mostly an indicator that something might be wrong, not an indication that something is wrong. Next, let's talk about smell. So rats do smell. They obviously have an odor because they're an animal, they're a mammal, and this smell can be urine and it can be their feces, but sometimes they have a different smell. And if you've ever smelled infection, you know what it smells like. It is very foul, it is a very distinct odor. And if you smell that coming from them, that's not their pee and not their poop. If you smell a foul odor, that could be an indication that there is an infection going on. And it is very important that you locate where that infection is. Typically, if you smell it, I would assume that it's kind of come from around their head, typically. But sometimes, even if there's an abscess or something, you can see the abscess. So if the only indication you have is scent, I would assume that there's something going on somewhere on their body that is hidden, and you need to examine them, figure out where the scent is coming from. And for that one, that is an immediate vet trip, because infections need to be taken care of very, very quickly. Now, this one might not seem like a subtle one, but let's talk about their breathing. So the reason it might not seem like a subtle one is because you've probably seen videos of rats online that are having heavy labored breathing, or possibly even gasping for air. Yes, that's not subtle. They very clearly need to go to a vet. But sometimes their breathing increases just slightly, just a little bit. And that can also be an indication that they have either heart problems or some kind of respiratory issue going on. Or sometimes it can even be an indication that they had a minor stroke or some kind of medical event that needs intervention. So if you notice that they are breathing heavy, I would monitor them for a day or two. If the breathing continues to be heavy, that's when you should take them to the vet. Now, this next one is a little bit timely for me, and that's stretching. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that my Kelpie girl, she has some internal tumors, and my first indication that something was wrong, other than something we'll get to in a second. But my first real indication that something might be wrong is that she was stretching. And she was specifically stretching her back end, not really her front end at all. And she was doing this when she was just up and about. Like, so she hadn't woken up, she wasn't sleepy, she was just walking around. She didn't need a yawn, she was just stretching her abdomen a lot. And I have a video that kind of shows it. I'll pop it up. It's not the best video to indicate the behavior I'm talking about, but it can kind of show you. And the reason I noticed this is because it looked like uncomfortable stretching. Like she was trying to work something out. And she was doing it consistently over the course of about a week or so before I was like, okay, this is not a tummy ache. This is not some kind of issue that is going to go away. I need to see if it's tumors because I suspected it was going to be tumors. So abdominal stretching can mean like they have an upset tummy. So like if you notice it for like long periods of time after you've changed their food, maybe change their food back, see if it goes away. Otherwise, I would suggest going into the vet and seeing if they can tell you what, or see if they can find anything on the inside that needs to be addressed. This one's gonna be a little bit hard to explain, but I've had a lot of rats. I've mainly had female rats. I've only had 5 male rats. And so I'm used to mammary tumors. And I usually find them when they're fairly new, like when they're fairly small, I mean. And one of the ways that I thistle. One of the ways that I find them is that if it's in the armpit area of your girl rats, sometimes when they're really small, the skin just kind of like loosens. It looks like it's like pulled away a little bit from the armpit. And it can look like that if your rat's a little bit overweight too, but it's like very distinct, like just a difference where the skin in their armpits just like not quite where it was. It's a little looser. And if you go in and you feel, a lot of times you can feel like a very small tumor. Oftentimes I find them when they're like the size of a grain of rice. Because of this, because their skin in their little armpits just like looks a little looser. Another one that again may not seem subtle, but a lot of times you can catch it a lot earlier if you weigh your rats. So that's weight loss. Weight loss is oftentimes the first indication that something is wrong. So if you weigh your rats weekly, which is what I suggest, you get a kitchen scale, you weigh them weekly, you can monitor their weight very closely. And a lot of times weight loss isn't like, oh, they lost 30 grams in a week. A lot of times it's like they lost 20 grams over the course of 4 weeks or something. And it's the consistent, steady weight loss that can be an indication that there's something going on with them that needs to be addressed. And weight loss is one of those nebulous symptoms that can mean anything, but it can be an early indication that there is something wrong and perhaps a vet can find it. Next, let's talk about loss of mobility. Now, the obvious one I talk about a lot is HLD, but mobility can also be an indication of other things going wrong, such as neurological issues. And a lot of times people expect, like, if there is a stroke or some kind of neurological issue, that the loss of mobility is going to be sudden and obvious. And that is actually not the case a lot of the time. So, like, for example, my rat Joja, my first indication that she might have pituitary tumor was that her back legs weren't working very well. And she didn't have HLD because her tail was perfectly straight still. It was just she didn't have a lot of power in her back legs. This can also be an indication of a stroke if they suddenly lose a lot of strength in their back legs. And the difference between a stroke and a pituitary tumor is often pretty subtle. A lot of times people get the two mixed up. HLD is also caused by kidney issues though. So if you have a rat that has very fast onset HLD and it is progressing very quickly, that can be an indication that there is something wrong specifically with their kidneys. So that is something to keep in mind. If you have an older rat and it's happening very slowly and naturally, it just does happen. You can't really do much to stop HLD. You can supplement their food. You can make sure they're on a kidney-friendly diet. You can do things like that, but like there's not too much you can do about it. Next, let's talk about coordination. And again, coordination is one of those things that people look for pituitary tumors a lot. And it seems like it should be an obvious one. Like if they're not holding their food, then that's an indication something's wrong. But that's actually a very late symptom. So there's usually signs earlier on that something is wrong with their coordination. I find the best way to figure out something's wrong is how they eat. So if they choose to eat their food off the ground as opposed to holding it, why. Sometimes this can be because they are too heavy to hold themselves up if you have an extremely obese rat. Sometimes it can be that they have weakness in their legs and they can't hold themselves up, like with HLD. It can be a sign of a pituitary tumor. And it can also just be a sign of general weakness. So if you hand your rat a treat and they pick it up and put it down immediately and try to chew it before they get their hands on it, that can be an indication that there's something wrong neurologically and with their coordination. And now finally, we're going to talk about one of the more nebulous behaviors, which is personality changes. And the reason it's nebulous is because sometimes rats just do change their mind on something, or they grow, they change. They're like people. They're not always going to be the same. So, like, let's talk about Kelpie again. The first real indicator that something was wrong with Kelpie is that she was becoming aggressive. And the thing with the Kelpie is she has a history of aggression because she had hormonal aggression. And after I got her spayed, that went away and she was a beautiful little baby girl. But when she started to have aggression issues again, I didn't immediately clock that that was a symptom that she had a health issue going on, because she was just like that when she was younger. I just thought that she was becoming like that again. So if your rat, who's very sweet and friendly, suddenly becomes aggressive and they're not around that 6-month age mark where they have a surge of hormones, that can be an indication that they're uncomfortable or in pain in some way. Especially with a female rat, they might have something going on with their reproductive tract that needs addressing. It can also be an indication of neurological issues such as strokes or pituitary tumors. So it's not just if they become aggressive, though. If you have a very standoffish, unhappy, or even aggressive rat and they suddenly become extremely sweet and cuddly, that can also be an indication that they have a neurological problem that needs to be addressed. So yeah, that was a shorter video. I don't feel like I was talking for too long, but yeah, those are just some symptoms that can indicate that your rat has something going on that isn't obvious yet, but that you need to pay attention to and possibly take them to the vet for. And hopefully this was helpful to those of you who are watching it for just random rat advice. For those of you who are just here for fun, hi, hello. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that video, and if you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!